Welcome to year 2 of the Funding Love podcast. I'm Mallory Elrod.
And I'm Caitlin Duckworth. We are two adoptive moms that seek to love, support, and elevate all corners of the adoption triad, including adopted families, adoptees, and birth parents.
We do that through honest conversation with both expert and everyday voices about all things adoption and more, all while running our nonprofit, Funding Love.
We create post-adoption experiences that strengthen bonds, build community, and restore people.
We are Funding Love,
the podcast.
Welcome to episode 88 of the Funding Love podcast. I'm Mal, co-host of the podcast, along with my gal Kate, and this week we are talking with our friend and Funding Love alumni, Jessie Mattos. Jessie is a birth mom, an ethical adoption advocate, and professional. She placed her daughter for adoption in 2011, and while her journey to healing started out rocky, she has since found support and acceptance through being in community with other birth moms and from learning from all sides of the adoption community. We can't wait for you to hear her story and her perspective on the need for post-placement support. So let's jump right in.
Welcome, Jessie, to the Funding Love podcast. We are so excited to have you on the show. Welcome.
Hey, guys. Thanks for having me.
Oh my gosh, we're so excited to have you. And we've said a little bit about who you are and how we know you, but tell our audience a little bit more about you, where you're from, who's your hubby. Tell us about your kiddos. Give us a little bit about you.
Yeah, well, I'm Jessie Mattos. I'm a birth mother of 12 years. I'm married to my husband, Gabriel, and we parent our two sons, little Gabriel, who will be 6 at the end of this month, and Micah, who is 4. I grew up in the Orlando area, born and raised. I did go away to school in Gainesville for 6 years, but found my way back home to Orlando, and I don't think I'll be leaving really anytime.
Yeah, once you're in Florida, where
Right.
do you go from there? Yeah, I feel you on that. Well, we're so glad to have you, and we have known you just for, I would say, gosh, the last few months of our lives. We've known you over the last year as, we anticipated you joining us on the Funding Love birth mom trip, but we finally got to meet you this past September, and it was really just like a fast friendship. And we are so grateful now to have you in our Funding Love family and in our circle. So
Yes.
So this is really cool that you're continuing giving back and jumping on this episode with us. But if you would share with us a little bit about your story as a birth mom and your journey there.
Yeah, sure. I was 19 when I got pregnant with my birth daughter, and I placed her in March of 2011. I've sort of been involved in the adoption community since the beginning of my journey, but mostly just speaking on birth panels and to adoptive families and at fundraisers and various events like that. I honestly didn't want anything to do with the adoption community when I first placed. And I never really immersed myself within the birth mother community because of that until around the fall of 2018. Before the 2018, I would say I was dealing with a lot of shame surrounding my pregnancy and placement, and it was still pretty much a secret. During my pregnancy, we didn't talk about it much. I didn't tell a lot of friends what I was going through. I had moved back home during my pregnancy and was just trying to figure out how to navigate that. It felt like the elephant in the room that only I knew about, which made it very hard for me to navigate life and grief post-placement. And I was having a very, very hard time adjusting to my new normal of sorts. Fortunately for me, I had a pregnancy counselor who was more like a friend, and she would always pester me to get involved after placement, and I'd always turn her down. And when they would have support groups and things like that. But one day, back in the fall of 2018, she heard about a Brave Love dinner happening in Gainesville. And she was like, oh, Jessie's a sucker for Gainesville. I bet I can convince her to go to this. And so sure enough, I was like, okay, you know what? I'll go up to Gainesville. I've got my sister up there still and a close friend of mine. So I figured I'd just make a weekend out of it. And I had very low expectations for how this dinner was going to go. But pretty much when I walked into that dinner, I walked in as one version of myself and left a completely different version.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow. And tell us, like what a Brave Love dinner is for those who don't know. Like,
Right.
we know Brave Love is an organization that speaks for birth moms and is a birth mom. But tell us a little bit about what the dinners are.
Yeah, so Brave Love hosts these dinners around the country, I think twice a year now, just for birth mothers. So they do it in various locations. They've done a few in Orlando. There's actually one coming up this Thursday is their next round of dinners, and I'll be attending the one in Orlando this time too. So they've got them all over the place. I feel like they keep adding more locations every time they do it, but it's just a time for birth mothers to connect over just a casual dinner and kind of take the pressures off of like the support group atmosphere. Of course, it kind of naturally goes in that direction sometimes, but it's just really casual, and I love them. And I'm here for that.
and those dinners are birth mom led, right? They're
Correct.
organized by birth moms and birth mom led. So only birth moms are in the room, which is such like a safe space.
Oh yeah,
like a comfortable space.
Oh yeah. You know, when I went to the one in Gainesville, like I said, I had very, very low expectations, but everyone at that dinner was just so comfortable with who they were as birth mothers, and I was just so painfully and acutely aware of how much confidence was lacking in my own story. I was just in complete awe of these women and learned so much from them. I had no clue that there was even like this whole online adoption world that was, you know, recently starting to like explode and come out of nowhere. So when I left the dinner, I spent hours researching and reading and joining Facebook groups and following all these Instagram accounts. I really could not get enough of it, and pretty much have not stopped since. And quite frankly, I did more healing in the 6 months that followed that dinner than I had done in the 7 years leading up to it.
Wow. So I have a question, because you said that you, like, throughout your pregnancy, it was kind of like the secret and the elephant in the room that only you like knew about. So what was that process like? Did people that didn't know about your pregnancy find out about that in that time period between then, or did you really not start talking about it until you met other birth moms? Like, when did you become open with your story, even before that dinner? Like, were you at all?
Kind of. I mean, that's a great question. So at first, no. I would say probably 2015, 2016, maybe, I was slowly starting to become a little bit more comfortable sharing it with people who weren't in my tight circle. I mean, my best friend didn't even know I was pregnant until I was 6 months pregnant.
Wow.
And so it just took me a really, really long time to find my voice. And so slowly but surely I would meet new people and trust them and kind of share my story. But it was always this really big deal. And I hated that it always had to be this really big deal for me. And so that's why when I walked into that dinner and everyone was just so casual about it, I just craved that so badly. And so again, maybe a few years leading up to that, I had started to slowly share, but I certainly was not public with it by any means. And so after that dinner, that's kind of when I made that decision to make it casual for me, make it normal for me, because this is my life. This is who I am. And I can't be hiding anymore. I'm doing myself a disservice, and I'm doing my daughter a disservice by not, healing in that way and accepting my title as birth mom.
Yeah. And what I love about that story is that it wasn't spurred on through like intense therapy or counseling. It was spurred on through community.
Yep.
Like, that's incredible to me, that just the power of community. That's really cool. Yeah.
Of being like seen and understood and just like that. Gosh, these women get me.
Yeah.
I get, that's so important. So I'm curious what your opinion of, or your view, because I know that you earlier just said like you didn't really, after you placed, want anything to do with the adoption world. But before, did you, like, what was your view of adoption before you placed? And I guess compare that to your experience now.
No.
Yeah, so I didn't really have any view of adoption, I guess. I didn't really know any adoptees. I didn't know any birth parents, and I didn't even really know any adoptive families. I didn't even know a lot of single mothers. And so the idea of just like parenting and being an unwed pregnant teenager was really, really scary. And so going into this, I thought I wanted a closed adoption, and my pregnancy counselor did encourage me to at least consider semi-open, because I just assumed that a closed adoption would be less confusing for my daughter. So I'm so thankful that she did encourage me to at least consider a semi-open. And even 10 years ago, open adoptions looked so different than what they do now. But yeah, I just really was not prepared for how difficult the healing process was going to be for me. And then add the shame and the secrecy on top of it. And it was just a recipe for disaster, to be honest. And one of the reasons I didn't want to be involved in the birth mom community is because I had a lot of internalized stigma surrounding unwed pregnant teenagers and birth mothers, and I couldn't accept that I was one. The more distance I put between myself and other birth mothers, the better, or so I thought. And that's again why the Brave Love dinners was so impactful for me. It was such a humanizing experience and really helped me realize that other birth moms are just like me and I like them. And it really is like why we need each other. Like that peer support is just so important.
Was there a part of you that when you know, in that in between of when you placed to when you kind of went to that Brave Love dinner, didn't want to like affiliate yourself with that community? So you just said kind of ignored that in the sense of like, I don't really want to belong to that community. So I'm just going to keep moving on, you know, and kind of somewhat pretend that that isn't me. In a
Exactly.
way.
Yeah. I didn't want to accept that I was a birth mom. I was not them. Like that was kind of my mindset. And again, I had these internalized ideas of who birth moms were. And I look back on that and I feel really sad for that, Jessie, for having these thoughts, and really sad for the women that I thought this about. And when I was one, you know, I am one. And so, but I was bursting at the seams. I mean, I really was just bursting at the seams and ready to share my story and ready to like scream it from the rooftops because I couldn't do it any longer. It was exhausting keeping tabs of all the details and who knew what. And it was just too much. And so whenever I'm in a setting with other birth mothers, there's always a few that are really early on in their journey. And I'm just blown away by them, that they're showing up for themselves and getting involved so early in their journey. And they have no idea how powerful it is that they're showing up for themselves in ways that a lot of us were incapable of doing so early on. And, you know, people say to birth mothers a lot, we hear it a lot that, oh, you're so brave. Adoption's the brave choice. But honestly, showing up for yourself after the fact is what's brave.
Yeah, I'm sure that is really hard to take something that, I mean, if you say you already just having to place your daughter had those stigmas, to know that other people have those stigmas about you, it's just really hard to like say that out loud and to talk about that. And yeah, I can't imagine, but it really is. That is, it is a braver thing to be able to say like, no, I'm going to do this for me. And like, I'm not alone and I'm willing to put myself out there, because that feels really scary. I can imagine that feels really scary.
Well, it's not just that. It's not just for me. Like I said, like I was doing my daughter a disservice by not healing and finding that support and getting educated so that I can handle myself and handle this adoption well, because you never know what the future is going to look like. And so while, you know, you can never truly you could plan all you want, but you're never truly prepared, but you can certainly go into it with as much knowledge as you can get and as much healing as you can get. And that's kind of the way that I looked at it, was I need to do something. I can't just sit around and this be me for the rest of my life, because this is serving absolutely no one.
Yeah, but it's so inspiring, honestly, for like a birth mom who might be listening, or I mean, really anybody, for them to hear your story, honestly, right there, and for you to be so honest about where you were before you found community, and then like that. I just want to like encourage these women now, like it's okay to feel what you're feeling, but like you're not alone, and your story doesn't define you. It is a part of you, and you are worthy of the community, all of that. Like, and to see where you are now, it's just really inspiring for you to be so open about that, because I feel like there are women who are in that place right now, right there, who want that community, but kind of are afraid to embrace it, because then that's them admitting what they went through and kind of reliving it again, I guess, maybe.
Yeah, it's painful, and denial and shame can dictate every decision you make.
Yeah.
And it's exhausting, and I couldn't do it anymore.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I think there's also so much power in sharing a story too.
Mm-hmm.
I read a quote the other day that was like, you would love everybody if you just genuinely knew their whole story. Like there wouldn't be anybody that you wouldn't love if you just knew their story about why they were where they are, what they had experienced or whatever. But I think one of my favorite things about being able to have Funding Love or have a podcast where we can let people share their stories is seeing people on the outside of adoption hear these stories and say, oh, dang, I thought that about birth moms too, but I think I want to be friends with her. Like, she's just like me. Like, you know what I mean? Maybe we had different situational things happen in our life, but like, oh, I like her. Whereas before they would think kind of similar,
Right.
all those stigmas about birth moms. They think, oh, well, I wouldn't have been friends with her in college. No, you probably would have been,
Yeah.
because they're just normal women. We're all just normal women.
Yeah.
And I love being able to have your story and other women like you, your stories, like just tear down those walls for people that are listening that have those perceptions.
Yeah, it's true. I mean, I
Yeah.
think growing up in a very conservative Christian community too, that played a role in these stigmas that I, had. And so I really had to kind of break through that and deconstruct that. And, again, it was life-changing when I finally was able to meet other birth moms face to face and actually get to know them and talk to them and share dinner with them and share some laughs. And it was just amazing.
And I just love that Brave Love does it over a meal. Is there
Oh, I
not
know.
something just beautiful in life about feasting with someone and
Yep.
having a meal? It just, that alone kind of takes down
Yeah.
walls itself. So I think
It's always
that's
my
just so
favorite
cool.
part. It's always my favorite part of our Funding Love vacations is that last dinner together. It's always my favorite. I feel like you have all, the whole trip's amazing and so fun. But I feel like that's where like everything is solidified. The
Yeah.
friendships, everything is like, because you're eating together, you're dining together, you're experiencing that. Yeah, Mel,
Yeah.
I agree. I think that's great.
Yeah.
But Jessie, you said that, 5 years ago or 5.5 years ago when you went to that Brave Love dinner, you really haven't stopped ever since.
Yeah.
And I mean, clearly that has led you to your line of work now.
Yeah.
So you are working with Abiding Love, who we love and we've partnered with before and things that we've done. But tell us about Abiding Love and tell us about your job there, what you do. Tell us all about that.
Yeah. So after that dinner, like I said, I just started trying to get plugged in and just started meeting new people on the internet, of course. And it was weird because this random but wonderful woman on the internet, hi Hannah, took a chance on me and asked me to come work with her for her profile book company called Kindred as the birth mother advisor and editor. So that job, which I still do today, that job led me to get even more involved. And then that gave me the confidence to pursue a career working directly with birth mothers, adoptees, and adoptive parents. So now I am currently the director of birth mother programs at Abiding Love Charities, which is the sister company to Abiding Love Adoption Agency. This agency is licensed in South Carolina, Georgia, and Florida. And we do things a little bit different as we represent expectant and birth parents, not adoptive parents. So it's flipped. But Abiding Love Charities was created specifically to provide thorough education, support, and services to birth parents, adoptees, and adoptive parents, both before placement and after. And we really do strive to set the standard for pre and post placement care and certainly don't accept the bare minimum. And some of the services that we do provide and some of the projects that we've been working on are, we've got our Birth Mother Grant Program, we've got our Birth Mother Mentorship Program, we do financial planning courses, we do a lot of education, of course, for adoptive parents and industry organizations, we've got mediation services, and just kind of the list goes on. We definitely have some exciting things coming in 2024 that I'm really excited about. And then all of our programs are designed by the members of the triad they are geared towards. And we are constantly thinking of ways of how we can serve this community in innovative and accessible ways. So these programs, if it's for birth mothers, it's designed by birth mothers. If it's for adoptees, it's designed by adoptees.
It's
That's
awesome.
so great.
And you work with Britt Palladino over
I
there,
do.
who we just love. We've had her on the podcast before, so we've got to know her, which is great. Yeah, that's just such a great organization, and we loved partnering with them. So I love that you're still doing that.
Yeah.
That you are like, you found yourself and you dove in, and you're like, how can other birth moms take this and feel what I'm feeling and find that community? So that's great.
Like, how can I make this feeling tangible?
Yeah. Yeah. So, at Funding Love, we serve birth moms and adoptive families post-placement. Like, that is our thing, post-placement. So, we saw gaps there, and we understood how important it was to have support in those months and years post-placement. So I'd love to hear from you how important post-placement support is as a birth mom, speaking as a birth mom, but also as a professional, clearly.
Oh, yeah. So post-placement support is really everything. It's the difference between sanity and insanity for birth mothers, to be quite honest. If you want healthy moms, you support them. And that's just across the board, whether you're parenting or not. Moms need support, especially those who have experienced deep loss.
Yes.
When I was in the thick of my grief, I failed to really understand it as grief. I figured since I chose this adoption, it wasn't a loss, and that denial prevented me from making sense of what happened. Wow. I guess I didn't feel worthy of experiencing this pain. And I'm not a crier. You're not going to find me wallowing in the corner. And so my grief manifested differently. And that made it harder for me to identify that what I was going through was grief. It really wasn't until one day I was seeking counsel and I was sharing my story, and they stopped me mid-sentence and they said, "You do realize that what you experienced was traumatic, right?" And this was like 6 years post-placement. Wow. And that was my first aha moment, so to speak. And it really just all made sense. All my behaviors, my attitudes, and my internal struggles all made sense. My second and much more profound aha moment would come a year later at the Brave Love dinner. But post-placement support, I mean, even for adoptive families and adoptees, knowledge is power. We hear it all the time, but it really, truly is. And we all have to kind of work together to make this be successful. And when I say successful, I'm not talking about like a successful placement. I'm talking about successful open adoptions that are fluid, that are organic, that are collaborative. And you can't do that without support. And that extends beyond the agency. Those are your friends. It's your circle that you surround yourself with. This is the people that you get advice from. Post-placement support is everything if we are going to do this right.
I have never really heard anybody say that. When you said it was my decision, so I didn't view it as a loss. Like, I'd never heard anybody say that. Like that, and then so basically what you're saying is it was my decision, so I can't complain about it.
Yeah.
Right. Like, and so I can't be sad about it and sit here and be upset because I chose it. Wow. Like, that I've never really heard anybody say it that way. And so casually, because that's so real. Yeah. Of like, it's almost you being hard on yourself. Yeah. Well, it was my decision.
Right.
So,
Yet at the same time, it makes sense, and it seems like something I would rationalize with myself. So there have to be other women out there that are feeling and thinking the same thing and not allowing themselves to process through that. And just hearing those words kind of gives you that permission to say, no, it still is a loss.
Yeah. And while I might have recognized it as a loss on paper, I guess I didn't truly understand the magnitude of that loss. Right. And, it even goes along with the lines of that narrative that birth mothers are fed of like, oh, this was you're so brave. You made such a good decision for your child. And so when we hear those things, it doesn't leave space for much else. And so we keep telling ourselves like, oh, I made the right decision to try to rationalize our placement. And that was another thing. It's just because we can rationalize it and know that we might have made the right decision doesn't mean that there is a ton of pain that's going to come along with that.
For sure.
Oh my gosh. Yeah. And you kind of answered this question earlier by your whole story of being in community at your Brave Love dinner, but when it comes to the post-placement journey and finding healing or whatever in that, how important is community in finding quote unquote healing post-placement?
Never underestimate the power of peer support. That's for sure. I used to think all of that feel good stuff was just like a bunch of baloney, if I'm being honest. I was pretty cynical
I'm kind of
about
that way. I'm such a skeptic too. I'm kind
Yeah.
of like,
Yeah,
yeah.
I wasn't very receptive to it, if you will. But once I took a chance and really opened myself up to this community, I kicked myself for not doing it early.
Yeah.
Quite frankly, peer support has changed my life. And I learned so much from my fellow birth mothers and have been able to seek advice and insight from ones who have gone before me too. I've got a few birth mothers who are older than me, very trusted friends of mine, and how should I respond to this text message? Or how did you
Yeah.
handle this conversation with your family? Things like that. And so that's, again, why that peer support is so important, not just for birth parents, but for adoptive parents, is we need to learn from the people who have gone before us, and also so that we can help the people that are going to go after us.
Mm-hmm.
And it's just, this is such a small community, and I know it's hard to find people, like-minded people in this community as well, that you're going to click with and mesh with, but you have to be intentional about it, because we're talking about people's lives here. We're not just doing like a product review. We are talking about someone's life, and we have to figure out the best way to support these children. And one of the best ways to do that is also to support the mother. And we can't do that without community.
That is so true. I mean, we believe that is a huge part of our mission at Funding Love. And I mean, now you're a Funding Love alumni, which is, we're so grateful for. We've said that a few times already. But I'm curious, let's go back to your trip. Let's go back to this past September. And what made you want to apply for Funding Love? I'm curious.
The turkey legs.
And ice cream bars.
No, I'm just kidding.
Except for I missed them, but that's all right. No, I really, really love this community. I think I've expressed this to you guys. Like, I take away something new every single time I'm with other birth mothers, and I saw this as such an interesting and fun way for me to connect with them outside of the normal support group setting,
Yeah.
And honestly was kind of surprised that I got picked since I'm local. I'm like, oh, you know what? Like, I live in Orlando, but I'll just try to crank out these nominations and see if I can get on board. So
I love that. What would you say your biggest takeaway was from the trip?
It was such a refreshing trip for me, and was a good reminder for me to continue to pursue relationships in situations like this. I was really able to connect with these women on a friendship level, and not just because we share the title of birth mother. In support group settings and things like that, it can be very heavy sometimes, and it can be hard to be yourself and come as yourself, And in this trip, I was really able to do that. And I was able to meet some women who I'd been friends with on the internet for a couple of years. And so that was just really wonderful. And it was just a really good reminder for me to continue to pursue these relationships.
Yeah. And I want to say too, like, when we are reading through all of the applications, like, we truly read through every story and the things that these people write. And then we are also intentional about choosing some that are further along in their journey as a birth mom, and then some that are just starting out or just seeking, some that have had support for years, and then some that say, oh, I've never met another birth mom. And like, you obviously were someone that had found yourself in that support arena before Funding Love, and you are now even a leader in that birth mom like support arena. But do you still feel like it was beneficial to you, even though you're the one that's like, now you've moved into this place of giving support to birth moms? But Caitlin and I still feel like you never stop needing like a refresher course for yourself of like, I still need to be like leaned into a little bit too, and loved on and cared for. So do you still feel like you came into that space being able to be loved and cared for, and not just like, oh, I'm going to lead you?
Absolutely. You guys set the tone in a way that makes it, there's no pressure. So I was able to kind of take my professional hat off a little bit, and again, get to just know these ladies as friends. It wasn't this like heavy support group where you have to be, empathetic, and not that you're not already, but I was just, again, really able to connect to them as myself because it wasn't a support group setting. Like you guys set the tone as like, this is fun and this is how we want you guys to connect. And that's exactly what it was. So I got way more out of it than I thought I would. Not that I didn't think I would get anything out of it, but I just really, it was just such a good reminder for me that these relationships matter, that I need to be fed in these ways and pursue these friendships and these relationships with these women, and that it's okay for me to take that professional hat off and to come as myself and not worry about everyone else and making sure that they're okay and just kind of worry about myself. And again, sometimes the support group settings or like the retreat settings can be very heavy. We've got long sessions and we're talking about grief and, we're encouraging each other and supporting one another, which still happened, of course. But the fact that it was so lighthearted, I think all of us were able to just kind of let our guard down in that way and really just meet each other where we were at. And honestly, I mean, there's plenty of women at that trip that we didn't even really share our stories because we're all birth moms. Like we get it. We don't really have to talk about it. And that was really nice. So.
Yeah, that's kind of cool too. So we're going to have our next round of applications opening up here in the beginning of 2024. I mean, this year's flying by. Yeah. So what would you tell a birth mom that's listening that's maybe thinking about applying for that trip come next February, March?
Yeah, don't do it. Or don't think, just do it. Don't think.
I was like, don't do it.
Don't do it.
No, don't think, just do it. If you have any anxieties about traveling or new places or new people, if that's what's preventing you from going, leave those anxieties at home. I know it's easier said than done, but let someone else care for you for once. Every detail is taken care of. There's no pressure for you to share your story once you get there. You're not going to be put on the spot. You won't regret going, but you will regret at least not trying.
Oh, yeah.
That's it. Love that.
Yeah.
So this is a big question, but I'm going to wrap it up with this. So what is your greatest wish for the birth mom community?
Oh man, I got a lot of them. I'll try to make it short, sweet. My wish is that obviously every birth mother finds true healing and peace with their decision. I wish that all of them would receive like sufficient education and support needed to maintain healthy open adoption with their child and adoptive families. And I don't want any birth mom to ever take their story to the grave again.
That's a good one.
Yeah.
Yeah, that means you've lived a life alone carrying something that you don't need to carry alone, because there's so many who will carry that with you and hear you, and you will realize that that is not all that you are.
Yeah, I still meet women who are in their 60s, 70s, who have never told anyone, not even their husbands, and things are so different now, but there's still women older than me, younger than me, who don't talk about it and don't share it. And I've been there while I was only there for maybe 6 years. That was the most challenging 6 years of my life.
Right.
And I can't imagine living a lifetime of that.
Wow.
Yeah, that sounds heavy. That sounds heavy for one person to carry.
Yeah.
So at the Funding Love podcast, we like to end, because we're the Funding Love podcast, we like to end our episodes with a little extra love. So what is one thing that you're loving right now besides Survivor?
Oh, I was just going to say, aside from the newest season of Survivor.
So just so everybody knows, all three of us we're all three big Survivor fans. I think Jessie might take the cake.
Yeah, for sure she does.
Survivor fan. But anyways, we all geeked out on talking Survivor when we were together. So, but what are you loving right now in this season?
Well, this weather has been really nice.
Preach it, I know, hasn't it?
Thank goodness. And honestly, I'm just feeling really incredibly thankful for my mom friends during this season of my life. I've been very lucky to have found a really good community here of moms, and we just really support one another as we navigate raising toddlers and young children, and I'm just really loving them and appreciating them during this season.
Yeah.
That's a good one. I think
motherhood, no one should mother alone, that's for sure.
No. It takes a village.
Yeah, and whatever.
Really.
in whatever
like
capacity
you said earlier,
that is.
It's like difference between sanity and insanity.
Mm-hmm.
You know, you got to have a village of moms.
Yeah.
It's so true.
Yes.
No, that's a great answer.
Yes.
This was a great episode, Jessie. Thank you for, you know, just being so open and vulnerable and sharing your heart and your journey. Because I am certain that it has helped somebody who is listening. And even somebody who, like Mal was saying, is not a part of the adoption community, who gets another glimpse, you know, into this community, into listening to a birth mom and hearing that story. And hopefully, like we all say, just kind of breaking down those stigmas and those preconceived opinions that may exist. So thank you so much. Honestly, it means so much. And we're so glad that we get to chat with you again.
I know. Thanks for having me, guys. This was fun.
Yes, absolutely. And thank you, listeners, for tuning in to this episode of the Funding Love Podcast. We'll see y'all next week.
Thank you for listening to this episode of the Funding Love Podcast. We are a crowd-funded nonprofit, which means that people like you can make a lasting impact on the adoption community. The new year is just around the corner, so if you are looking for a place to make an end-of-year donation, we would love for you to consider partnering with us. All financial gifts are 100% tax deductible, so visit fundinglove.com/donate to give today and to proudly say that this holiday season, you are funding love.